Have you ever asked God to give you a sign? Well, we're going to see Gideon do that several times today in Judges chapters 6 through 7. But first, welcome to Experiencing God, 365 Days Through the Bible, day 91. So yesterday we met the first four judges, Othneil, Ehud, Shamgar, and Deborah. Today we will meet the fifth judge, Gideon. Okay, so Gideon was like most normal people. He wanted a sign from God on what he was supposed to do. Can you relate? I can. So after Deborah, she judged for 40 years, there was peace. And after her, the Israelites did evil again in the sight of the Lord, and God handed them over to the Midianites for 7 years. Now, the Midianites were very cruel. Very cruel. They would steal from them. They were basically to the point of starvation. And so Israel calls out again to the Lord for help. And he responds. Now, an angel of the Lord goes and visits Gideon where he is. And the angel of the Lord calls Gideon a hero. And Gideon is like, who is this guy? Like, what is he talking about? And he tells him, hey, Gideon, you go and you rescue the people from the Midianites. And Gideon, like any human, was like, me? How? Like, how am I going to do that? So in Judges chapter 6, verses 16 through 17, the Lord said to him, I will be with you, and you will destroy the Midianites as if you were fighting against one man. One man. That's how strong you're going to be because I'm with you. Gideon replied, if you are truly going to help me, show me a sign to prove that this is really the Lord speaking to me. Don't go away until I come back and bring my offering to you. So here's the first sign that Gideon asked for. He's like, if you really are who you say you are, don't leave. I'm going to bring an offering. So Gideon goes and gets his offering. He brings it back. He places it upon a rock, and an angel of the Lord touches the offering and burns up in fire. The Lord receives the offering. And it's at that point, Gideon's like, oh my goodness, you really are an angel of the Lord. I've seen the Lord face to face. I'm going to die. And God's like, no, you're not going to die. And Gideon builds an altar to the Lord when he realizes he has seen the Lord face to face. Now, the angel tells Gideon to tear down his father's altar to Baal and his Asherah pole. And so Gideon does this. And then he also, on his altar that he built, he sacrifices the second bull, as the angel told him. Now in the morning when the people wake up and they realize that Gideon has torn down the altar and the Asherah poles where they sacrifice and do all of this, when they realize that Gideon and his 10 servants have done this, they want to kill Gideon. And Gideon's father, even though he was the one who had this altar to Baal, and this Asherah pole, he stood up for Gideon. And he's like, hey, let's see what happens, okay? So after this, in chapter 6, verse 34, it says, then the Spirit of the Lord clothed Gideon with power. Gideon did what the Lord said. He tore down the altar. He made a sacrifice. He listened to the Lord. He did it out of fear, right? And after that, God clothed him, right, with power. Chapter 6, verse 34. Then the Spirit of the Lord clothed Gideon with power. He blew a ram's horn as a call to arms, and the men of the clan of Abiezer came to him. All right, so Gideon, like a human, he asked God for 2 more signs. He's like, all right, God, really, if you want me to lead the Israelites into victory, I want another sign. He didn't ask for both of them at first, but he asked for the first one. He's like, I'm going to leave a piece of wool fleece out on the threshing floor. If in the morning I wake up and the fleece is wet, but the ground is dry, that'll be my sign that you want me to do this. So he woke up, the fleece was wet, he wrung it out, there was a cup of water, a bowl of water, the ground was dry, just as he has asked. And he comes to the Lord again, and he's like, don't be mad at me, but I want another sign, right? We always just want another sign from the Lord. And he said, this time I'm going to leave the fleece out overnight. If the fleece is dry in the morning and the ground is wet with dew, I will know. And it was when he woke up, just as he asked. So that's 3 signs. The offering was burned up on the rock. The fleece was wet. The ground was dry. The ground was wet. The fleece was dry. All right. In chapter 7, they prepare for battle. He knows he's supposed to go. And so he has 32,000 men ready to fight. And God's like, hey, you know what, Gideon, this is too many men. And so he says, tell the ones who are scared, maybe they're nervous. He said, tell them to go home. So that left him with 10,000. So 22 left him with 10,000. And the Lord's like, Gideon, that's still too many. He says, Gideon, take the men down to the stream, divide the men into 2 groups. Divide the men into those who drink the water by the cupped hand, and divide them by those who bow down to the stream and drink, just with their face in the water. So they did that. There were 300 men who drank with a cupped hand. The Lord said it's them. So he sends all the other men home. All right. And so this is what happens. the Lord said, I've given you victory over the Midianites. You just have to go. And so in Judges chapter 7, verses 10 through 11, it says, but if you are afraid to attack, this is God's goodness. He tells this to Gideon. He comes to Gideon. He said, if you're afraid to attack, go down to the camp with your servant Purah. Listen to what the Midianites are saying, and you will be greatly encouraged. Then you will be eager to attack. So they do this. Without even asking, God gives Gideon, out of his goodness, another sign. He's like, I've given you these other signs. This is what you're supposed to do. But if you're nervous, just sneak down there with your servant Purah. Listen to what they're saying. God gives him another sign without asking. So they go down. Purah and Gideon go down, and they hear a man telling about his dream where he says, Gideon will come and defeat us. Well, that got Gideon excited. That was all he needed. He goes back to his men. He's like, we're going to divide up into groups of 3. So 100 all around. We're going to go down to the camp. When I give the signal, we're going to blow the ram's horn. We're going to break the clay pots. We're going to have a torch in our hand. And we're going to shout, what do they shout? A sword for the Lord and for Gideon. And so this is what they do. They go down to the camp. They surround it. 3 different groups of 100 around. Gideon gives the sign. They break the clay pots. They have the torches. They blow the ram's horn. And the people, the Midianite people in the camp were so, it like scared them so much. They were so caught off guard that they fought against one another. And the ones who did not kill each other, the ones who were not killed, they fled. Then after this, Gideon calls to some of the other tribes, and he's like, come and help us. And they come and help. And when they do this, they capture and kill the Midianite commanders, Oreb and Zeb. They were killed. And that's where we end today in chapter 7. What stood out to you today? To me, it's God's faithfulness, right? He knew Gideon needed another sign, even though Gideon didn't ask. And he wanted Gideon to be encouraged to do what he had told him to do. And so he gave him that sign. God is so faithful. He wants us to be encouraged to do what he's called us to do. He loves us so much. Like, comment, share, subscribe. God sees you. He loves you. He has a great plan for your life. I pray the Holy Spirit ministered to you today through this. Tomorrow we will continue on with Judges chapters 8 and 9. See you there.